Typing really goes a long way. You can have an okay Pokemon with great typing, and it becomes a good or even great Pokemon. Just look at Gligar's long-standing competitive success. Usually, terrible Pokemon have terrible type combinations. It's not surprising that Pokemon littered with quad weaknesses, like Bastiodon, are at the bottom of the rung. However, there are those rare instances where there are Pokemon that are absolutely terrible in spite of having good typing. The kind of typing that has been a leading factor in the success of other Pokemon. So we're jumping right into these terrible Pokemon with amazing typing, and we're off to a fiery draconic start with Turtonator. Fire Dragon isn't just the coolest typing ever as unanimously agreed upon by every 10-year-old in the world, but an incredibly complementary stab combination consisting of two of the most ferocious offensive types in the game that became even more threatening when paired. Steel types that resist Dragon are terrified of fire, while the fairy types introduced later don't take too kindly to it either. Meanwhile, Fire's resists, Water, Rock, Fire, and Dragon, are obliterated by Dragon. In addition to really bringing the goods offensively, Fire Dragon is also deceptively apt defensively as well, with plenty of useful resists like Electric alongside quad resist to Grass and Fire, alongside similarly crucial neutralities. A Fire type neutral to Water is superb, as is a Dragon type neutral to Fairy and Ice. Finding out Fire Dragon isn't just awesome, but competitively excellent is kind of the equivalent of becoming an adult, and discovering your favorite action movie from when you were a kid is actually genuinely great cinema. We can call this the Terminator 2 effect. Indeed, the first Fire Dragon, Reshiram, may have famously been terrible in Ubers, but it was still an Uber that would remorsefully scorch OU given the chance. The next Fire Dragon was Mega Charizard X, finally fulfilling many a childhood dream, and it was one of the most dangerous Megas in OU over the next 2 generations. Its spiritual successor, Gouging Fire, was one of the most dominant Pokemon in Gen 9 OU, and was eventually banned. Then there's Turtonator, which was what we can call the Terminator 3 of the Fire Dragon types. On paper, Turtonator should be a terror, because it's not just a Fire Dragon, but it's a Fire Dragon with Shell Smash. In other words, it's got arguably the scariest offensive typing alongside one of the most broken boosting moves. Unfortunately, everything else about Turtonator is so bad, even in Gen 7, which lets it use a Z Crystal to unleash an ultra boosted Draco Meteor, it's untiered, not even in PU. Okay, not everything, as its base 135 defense is amazing, but number 1, it's got base 60 HP, and number 2, that's not the stat to be emphasized for a Pokemon trying to sweep with Shell Smash. Its base special attack is a mere 91, but maybe that can work since the Shell Smash boost is +2, and its stabs have such great coverage and such high base power. Oh, it's got base 36 speed? Never mind. It's got 2 bad options to choose between. Either go with the speed boosting timid nature so you can be as fast as possible, just barely outspeeding Pokemon like Tornadus, and Alakazam after a Shell Smash, and in doing so, wind up with an even greater issue KOing opponents thanks to the underwhelming special attack. Or actually, yeah, that is your only option, since if you go with a special attack boosting modest nature, you reach a truly unacceptable 342 speed after a Shell Smash, leaving you outsped by the likes of Keldeo. This is to say nothing of how easily played around for being so unthreatening Turtonator is before it gets that boost, or just how about every decent Scarfer, even the slower ones, will outrun it after a boost. Actually, the secret third option is just to not use Turtonator, and that is indeed the correct one. If the choices of the player base of the 2 gens it's existed in are anything to go by, yes, it's a turtle, it's not going to be fast, but it didn't have to be this slow. Even Torterra has base 56 speed. Let's not even mention Blastoise's base 78. Of course, even if it were faster, the fact that its special attack is so low means you don't even necessarily have to outspeed it to check it. Turtonator is well and truly terrible in spite of being given some of the greatest blessings a competitive Pokemon could have. It'd be one thing if it were just a bad Fire Dragon, but a bad Fire Dragon with the move that launched Gen 5 Cloisters of Ubers is so insane and almost feels deliberate. This next choice is shocking, but in a different way with Emolga. When you face Gym Leader Alessa, in the previous 5 games, you were probably highly irritated by her Pikachu clone Emolga volt switching all over you. Even when you did manage to get an attack off against it, it tended to be pretty irritating. Forget beating it with your Servine, this thing resists grass for some reason. It might have made you think, hey, this thing's pretty good. Of course, Emolga follows in the tradition of Pikachu clones not being good at all competitively, but it isn't because of its half-flying typing, which is definitely the best thing about it, and is usually recipe for success when attached to an electric type. How do you normally deal with electrics? Ground types, of course. Or if not a ground type itself, then Earthquake will do. What do you do then when the electric is also a flying type, and is actually one of the best counters to ground types around? This is the dilemma that has long plagued many unfortunate opponents of the mighty Zapdos, which regularly trouble troubles even the best teams simply by virtue of how difficult its typing makes it to overwhelm. Of course, it's got a lot more than just its typing, but that typing is how it made its career on taking on Pokemon that it seems like it should have no business beating, yet does so with such regularity you almost aren't even surprised when it winds up 1v1ing Tyranitar. As if that weren't enough, another legendary electric flying Pokemon came around, and Thundurus wound up dominating singles and VGC alike, once again in large part because of the many gifts of the flying typing enhancing its innate electric threat. While not at this incredibly high standard, the basic of electric flying being superb has applied to several others. Gen 9's Kilowattrel fires off strong, incredibly fast thunderbolts, and hurricanes to excellent effect. Oricorio Pom-Pom was the top threat in Gen 7 PU, and even Rotom Fan, while the worst Rotom appliance, is by no means a bad Pokemon. So Emolga, what does it bring to the table? Well, it has a great base speed stat of 103, which beats Garchomp's famous 102, as well as a valuable built-in electric immunity with its motor drive ability that boosts its speed even further. Alternatively, it can go with the ruinous contact punish of static paralysis, much like Zapdos has in later gens. In terms of moves, it can theoretically run Taunt, Roost, and Knockoff, like some sort of Zapdos with a Gliscor moveset. But at this point you look at its stats other than speed and realize Emolga can't do anything. With 55, 60, and 60 defenses, it's incredibly frail and thus unfit for some sort of utility set, but with 75 attack and special attack alongside no offensive move pool to speak of, it's not packing any sort of direct threat either. You can counter it with basically any Pokemon in any tier. It's a shame considering how adorable Emolga is, even by the high standards of the Pikachu clones, but it is well and truly hapless in any format. It's dark stuff, but not quite as dark as the journey these ghosts went on with Sableye and Spiritomb. Okay, maybe Dark Ghost isn't truly great typing, or maybe we can only think that because we haven't had an actual good Pokemon with it yet, besides Mega Sableye, whose greatness came from its incredible ability, Magic Bounce. In fact, its typing was one of the major factors holding it back. The reason we don't think all that much of Dark Ghost as typing is because it doesn't seem to have many useful resistances. But this might just be Sableye and Spiritomb's mediocrity overwhelming the combination's good qualities, which are aplenty. A Dark type not just neutral, but immune to fighting? Yes, please. A Ghost type neutral to both Dark and Ghost? It's tough to decide whether this is better in the Tyranitar-infested age of Pursuit or in the post-Pursuit removal age of Ghost brokenness. Additionally, having both stabs no longer resisted by Steel in Gen 6 is an enormous buff. Sure, the type combination famed for completely lacking weaknesses in Gens 3 through 5 gained its first with Gen 6, also introducing Fairy types, but that's a completely reasonable cost of doing business if the Pokemon in question is worth the effort. Heck, the introduction of Fairy types also made poison attacks much more widespread and effective, meaning that the Dark Ghost combo was able to actually utilize its resist that previously tended to fall largely on the useless side. These good qualities have gone mostly unappreciated, overshadowed as they are by Sableye and Spiritomb's shortcomings, namely their low HP, meaning it's pretty easy to bulldoze them with neutral hits, which are, well, most of the type chart. Spiritomb has the better bulk, but it's slow and it has to make the choice between Pain Split or Rest for recovery, both particularly pernicious poisons, and even with its good defenses, it's still not that bulky because of its low HP. Sableye has Recover, and come Gen 5, it gets priority on this thanks to its Prankster ability, so it winds up transcending its low speed. But it's just about the frailest Pokemon you ever want to rely on for defensive purposes. Neither Pokemon offers any sort of immediate offense. The closest they get is Will-O-Wisp, which, while amazing, especially with Sableye's Prankster, can't do all the work for them. Sableye and Spiritomb have had their niches. In early Diamond and Pearl, Spiritomb was the go-to rapid spin blocker for stall teams, while enjoying other utility like being able to perfectly counter Machamp. Meanwhile, Sableye actually found a unique role before it got Wisp, back in Gen 3, for how it completely counters Snorlax and had access to the then rare Knockoff. Then in Gen 5, it had its place on certain OU teams upon receiving Prankster. Its typing was especially nice for allowing it to wall the game-defining Alakazam and Reuniclus. It also had some VGC utility with Fake Out and being able to trick a lagging tail onto opponents, making them move last. However, both Sableye and Spiritomb were short-lived in their success, because ultimately, their stats undermined their promise time and time again. Many a player thought, hey, surely we're underrating this Pokemon bereft of weaknesses, only to quickly realize either the typing wasn't so good, or the Pokemon wasn't. Perhaps one day, we'll get an offensively focused Dark Ghost that will rip everything up, but until then, the type's largely relegated to the garbage, which, speaking of, we have Wormadam Trash. Not to be too literal, but Wormadam embodies this concept perfectly in its trash form, which is funny since that form has the best typing by far. Base Wormadam is Bug Grass, Sandy Wormadam is Bug Ground, and Trash Wormadam is Bug Steel. You can make just about any type good by pairing it with Steel, which is so defensively robust, it tends to shore up and give legitimacy to even the most defensively flawed types. Bug, for its flaws, actually complements Steel back quite nicely, offsetting the would-be fighting and ground weaknesses, while Steel canceling out Bug's Stealth Rock weakness allows the use of one of the best tools in the game, Stab U-Turn. Bug Steel actually works so well together, they wind up just just having one weakness, which is fire. A quadruple weakness, sure, but that means if you've got the bulk, you can take pretty much everything else in the game quite well. This is one reason why Scizor, Fortress, and Escavalier have been so good defensively. Bulky Swords Dance Scizor is famous for outlasting and sweeping teams that, once their team's one fire move is gone, are unable to break it at all. Even Genesect, which is hardly a defense-focused Pokemon, does quite a good job getting on the field. And of course, Genesect and Scizor have both wielded their massive stab U-turns to become some of the most terrifying offensive Pokemon in competitive history. Wormadam isn't going to be like those, of course, not just because it lacks U-turn, because Escavalier doesn't have the move either. Yet Escavalier is built for offense in addition to its impressive defensive profile. Wormadam's shaping up more to be in the Fortress camp. Fortress isn't hitting anything hard, but it's made a career of having incredible utility like Spikes, Rapid Spin, Toxic Spike, Stealth Rock, Volt Switch, all of which it spams so well because of the many opportunities afforded it not just by its bulk but its typing. Wormadam Trash doesn't have quite all of these, but it does have Stealth Rock and actually has Stab Gyro Ball, just like Fortress, and that's where the similarities end. Its focus is bulk, but it's a far cry from bulky, with dual base 95 defenses, not getting it too far when it's only got 60 base HP. Stealth Rock is nice, but there's a lot of Stealth Rockers out there that have much more to offer. If you can withstand the combination of Toxic and Gyro Ball, you'll be just fine against Wormadam Trash. Seeing as this is achieved by every halfway competent team ever, Wormadam Trash has seen nary a lick of competitive use, let alone viability, as if your team couldn't handle these two moves in tandem, well, you probably had bigger problems. At least it had Anticipation as its ability, so it could safely scout out potential fire coverage on opponents before any moves were made, but well, whatever benefit you gained from that wouldn't outweigh the fact that you were using Wormadam Trash. The Anticipation now is what the final Pokemon will be, and it is Flygon. Okay, this one might seem harsh at first, and maybe it is, but hear me out. Flygon is clearly nowhere near as bad as the other garbage on this list. It was a solid OU in its first 2 generations, excellent in UU after that, then was strong in RU for 3 generations, and retains a solid niche in the tier in Gen 9, where it reigns over NU. However, relative to the utterly incredible potential of its typing so good not just innately, but because it's got an ability helping out even further, Flygon has often been a major disappointment due to its low stats, a problem which has only increased over time, but was even present to some degree in its earliest best gens. Many a Gen 3 or 4 player has bemoaned Flygon's inability to reliably put away even those targets that it hits super effectively. It's a shame because Dragon Ground is absolutely incredible typing. Offensively, it is one of the best stab combinations there is, with ground shattering most steel types that resist Dragon and hitting Fairy neutrally when those were introduced, while most ground resists theoretically get melted by Dragon's massive power. Defensively, the two combine for a palette of superb resist, and this is enhanced even further by Flygon's Levitate ability, making it immune to Earthquake and Spikes as well. Beyond the direct resist, Flygon has amazing natural longevity. It's immune to not just Spikes, but Sandstorm as well, and has a Stealth Rock resistance to boot, and yet it pales in comparison to other Dragon Grounds, Garchomp and Zygarde. No, them being pseudo-legendary and legendary respectively doesn't make it better, as there are plenty of regular Pokemon that can match well against their rivals of loftier status, if not outright surpass them. For instance, Weavile is the best Ice type in Gen 8 Ubers, about a million times better than either Kyurem form, so there's really no reason why Flygon should languish so far behind Garchomp and Zygarde stat-wise, especially when Levitate is such an incredible distinguishing trait. Being able to switch into Earthquakes, being completely unbothered by Spikes and Toxic Spikes, those are major boons, and yet they amount to very little given Flygon's stats being so comparatively paltry, even if they're not bad necessarily. It's not exactly what you'd call particularly good either. It's not even necessarily about the power, as Zygarde also has only base 100 attack and is actually a tad slower, but 1000 arrows aside, Zygarde also has astonishing bulk, meaning it's not nearly as make or break if it doesn't immediately KO something. Meanwhile, Garchomp also has excellent bulk and is faster and is much stronger. Part of the problem is that Flygon has long since been seriously overlooked by Game Freak for very obvious fitting boosts that would go far in letting it make the most of its incredible offensive and defensive potential. Most notably, it took way too long to receive Dragon Dance. By the time it finally got the move, it was Generation 8. Of course, it was great to have, and Flygon used it to tear RU up something fierce, but it begs the question of why it couldn't have gotten it earlier in the generation where it would have been more impactful in a higher tier. Gen 4 Dragon Dance Flygon would be ferocious. In a similar vein, it took all the way till Gen 9 for Flygon to learn Stealth Rock, which players have rightly been clamoring for it to receive since Stealth Rock itself was introduced boost in Generation 4, especially since Garchomp got it immediately. And speaking of, even with Gen 9 gifting spikes to every ground type under the sun, literally even Groudon, and yes, including Garchomp, Flygon has still been excluded for some unhealthy reason, but surely not actually because it levitates above the earth, since Gliscor also got the move, and it's a literal flying type. Oh, and Flygon wouldn't be the worst candidate for Swords Dance for that matter. This is to say nothing of the fact that Flygon has also now twice been passed over for the Mega Evolution it so clearly deserves. But of course, Garchomp got one the first time, and now a Pokemon that already has an Ultimate form, Zygarde Complete, also gets one. Game Freak could at least throw it a bone with a base stat buff, like how Mantine went from 65 base HP from Gens 2 to 6 to 85 base HP in Gen 7, or even something less drastic, like how Roserade, an already good Pokemon, went from base 55 defense in Gens 4 and 5 to base 65 in Gen 6. Just something. Until then, Flygon is unfortunately doomed to remain invisible in the massive shadow of its competition. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Game Slayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Soljiro Sakura, Spavoon, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine, for their major support of our videos.